I'm going to start just to pick up on the Prime Minister's speech at the Lowy Institute last night. Now, this was a real seismic shift, Kel. We've heard a lot about UN governance, and I think in the debate about the UN, and I note the huge focus Australia had in all of our media organisations on what went on in New York last week. But in all of the debate about the UN, I think we can get caught up in thinking it's somehow a supranational governance body, that it's somehow a government level, but it's just a whole lot of states and nations coming together and agree on various principles. But the nation state, i.e. Australia, is supreme, and I think sometimes we might forget that.
Very easily. And in fact, I thought of a slogan that I think sums up the problem. No taxation without representation. The Americans fought a war of independence over that. They were being governed from London and they had to pay tax to London, but they couldn't elect anyone to the parliament that decided where the money went. As a matter of fact, our own Battle of the Eureka Stockade was about the same issue. It was a bunch of gold miners who had to pay this huge monthly licence to be gold diggers, and they were fighting against the authorities because they were not allowed to vote for the Victorian government that spent the money raised from then. Now, what happens is we've got a United Nations that wants a new $1 trillion fund for us to kick into, and they are demanding that we pay for a whole lot of things. It's my tax dollars, it's your tax dollars that they want, and we don't get to have any say in who they are, who's on their governing bodies, who's in the committees that make these decisions, or how our money is spent. That's not how it's meant to work. It's meant to work that our government that we elect makes decisions about our money. I think no taxation without representation tells us what's wrong with the UN taking policy positions and then trying to commit us and our money to it.
Well, you're absolutely right, Kel. I mean, last week we were barred from speaking at the climate summit because Australia wouldn't up the ante from the Paris targets. We've only just set Paris targets that are supposedly set to run until 2030. They want to up the ante now, a long way out from 2030. We said no. They said, well, you're not going to speak. Oh, but while you're at it, we want you, Australia, to tip into our $4 trillion fund. Gemma, this is where I think ordinary Australians are starting to walk away from bodies like the UN because all they do is lecture and hector Australia, and I think don't give us credit for all the good things we do, like being one of only 27 nations in the world that actually take refugees while 160 other odd nations do not.
Yeah, they're the global equivalent of the bullying school prefect, Peter. I think everyday Australians couldn't give two hoots about the United Nations. And let's just take another example of the need that's within Australia, and there'll always be need. There'll never be enough tax dollars to go around. That's just a fact of life. But we've got something like 80,000 elderly Australians on a waiting list for aged care in-home support packages that are waiting averages of 18 months to 2 years for that funding. And the United Nations turns around and says to Australia, like you just said, give us your trillions of dollars or billions of dollars towards our fund for X, Y, Z. It means nothing. It's intangible, actually, in many, many ways. And it also comes with absolutely no agency in the decisions that are being made about how those funds are being spent. So completely agree with the increasing irrelevance of the United Nations. It's almost like they've been kind of getting away with it for so long. And again, without wanting to sort of bang on that particular drum, it seems that these days anyone can get a gig speaking at the UN. We've got Greta Thunberg, you've got a long stream of entertainers and actors speaking about the causes that are dear to their hearts, and all of a sudden, because they speak at the UN, that automatically legitimises them as if they're somehow subject experts. The organisation, I feel, has strayed from the core that it was intended to be at its inception. And I think the Prime Minister was spot on. He was speaking directly last night to the people who elected him.
And you're right, and I think they use the celebrities to cut through because ordinary people have long left the cause that the UN originally was established for. But I'm going to get you to put your hat on, your Liberal Party hat there, Tina. This was a speech I think Conservatives have long wanted to hear the Prime Minister make, and I took it as a healthy sign he's going to speak up on some of these issues rather than be, the pragmatist sitting in the middle where he's, betwixt and between, neither fish nor fowl on some of the articles of faith of the centre-right. Now, can I be that hopeful?
Oh, it was a great speech, Peter. He was basically saying, look, We can never answer to a higher authority than the Australian people. This is exactly what we need to hear, and what I loved about it, the PM is genuine about this. He's passionate about representing the Australian people and representing our country and doing what's right for our country. And I think, it's like a breath of fresh air to say that we're not going to be dictated to by the United Nations and other nations. He's going to do what's best for Australia. It was a terrific speech. It's been well received by the party and electorates all around the country, Peter. It's something we've longed for. And the thing, he's not just saying it, he means it. And that's the difference.
Yeah, and I think he's had his wars with the UN as a former Border Protection Minister. We were pilloried for wanting to stop the boats. He did what no one else in the world has been able to do. So I think he's got a few battle scars there. Look, I'm going to put the speech up on my Facebook page so people can have a look. And I really would love people to read it themselves and not just run on the commentary, because I think it's worth the read.